So welcome to Projections, everyone. We have a whole bunch of people already that's joining us. So I just want to give a big shout out to everyone who is either joined a little early or just on time. We appreciate that. We're gonna just make a few announcements as we get started and get a soft rollout over the next 3 or 4 minutes, and we'll introduce our first presenter. So Frank, let's kick it off.
Hey guys, again, thanks everyone for showing up. We always like to thank our sponsors, which is B&H Camera, Epson, Pro Photo Daily, and American Illustrator and American Photographer, and the terrific folks over at Photo Shelter for always helping out. A few bits of information. We're going to do a quick turnaround, and next Tuesday, June 16th, we have another Projections all set up. So mark that in your calendars. Also, for everyone who has submitted and still wants to submit, and you could submit more than one video, the deadline has been moved back to June 19th. And those videos pertain to you guys interviewing anyone who's sort of put themselves in harm's way, whether it's a healthcare worker or your FedEx guy or your doorman or your CVS person, anyone who's kept everything open for all of us during this time with COVID. So any type of interview with those folks would very, very much be welcome. And it's about giving voice to all of these wonderful folks who've helped us out. And you could also mark on your calendar the 24th is the evening where we're going to have all those videos being shown. So mark that, because that's going to be really a fun night. And like I say, we'll get to hear from all these folks who you guys have taken photographs of. Now we're going to be giving them a voice. So tonight we have Timmy Fadek, Kevin Steele, and we start off with the wonderful, glamorous Carol Dronsfield. So Carol, it's all yours, dear.
Okay, thank you so much. So here we go. Okay. Hello, Frank and Cliff. Thank you so much for having me be a part of Projections. Hi, Tim. Hi, Kevin. It's great to be here with you. I am Carol Dronsfield, an advertising, editorial, and street photographer based in New York City. I'm relatively new to street photography. However, with the COVID-19 outbreak, I've had a lot to photograph in the last 3 months. Let me take you through what
Carol, if you don't mind, I just want to interrupt you. Hit that play icon for me at the top so we can see this in full screen.
I'm sorry?
Just hit that play icon at the top.
On your left.
Right there. There we go. There we go. Full screen. Perfect.
Thank you. I'm a little new to this, as you can.
We take you through, Carol.
Anyway, and also I wanted to say hello to all the folks who have tuned into this event. I'm so happy that you're here. The name of my project I'm going to share with you tonight is called Novel New York, Images of the City and the Pandemic. And the first image is from Times Square. That was the first place in New York that I visited, and I have to say it was so incredibly surreal. I drove into the city. I actually parked on Broadway, which is completely unheard of, and there was such an eerie feeling to the city. It was quiet. In this image, the only movement really that I saw in Times Square was this huge Jumbotron with the M&M, the different colored M&Ms with different expressions. When I saw this one, I thought, oh my God, this is exactly how I feel looking at Times Square. As I walked around, I saw the shops that were shuttered, that are usually, swarming with tourists, picking up their Statue of Liberty, their, T-shirts, and it was just totally strange. I then checked out the Lower East Side. And I have to say, when I was going out photographing, I would take my car. I wasn't going on the subway. I wore my mask, wore my gloves, had hand sanitizer in the car. So I felt I was protecting myself out there. And there were no people. So the social distancing really wasn't an issue. What I found roaming the streets, there were storefronts where they put up signs. Extra Butter is a small boutique, Lower East Side, putting a message out, "We miss you, New York." And this older woman who was standing on the sidewalk waiting for the bus, it's like she's waiting for New York to get back to normal. Here's another image, woman on the street. But you can see how some of the shuttered storefronts were actually like a canvas, a blank canvas for folks to put messages on or artwork. So one afternoon, I was in Little Italy roaming, and this was actually on Mulberry Street. And I happened to be there at 7 p.m. when the 7 p.m. clap for essential workers takes place. And what I found interesting in Little Italy, most of the folks clapping use the lids of their pots and pans to generate the noise of the applause for these heroic people, which I hadn't really seen before. In my neighborhood, it's clapping. But I missed the smells of delicious food on Mulberry Street. You know, the presentation of food, the you know, people with their gelatos. It was just really sad, but it was great to see people participating in the 7 p.m. clap. Another area that I explored was Coney Island. And this was early April, the first visit to Coney Island. And I was so struck by this young girl riding her bike and wearing this mask. Again, it made me so sad to see a child riding a bike with a mask. It was a very strange sight, but what I did try to turn this into a positive is that she is on her bike doing something normal and, you know, continuing with her childhood moving forward, and hopefully she won't have to wear her mask.
Yeah, Carol.
Yeah.
Carol, let me ask you a question. How do you,
Sure.
I mean, how was this process for you, for someone who organizes, you know, commercial shoots,
Yeah.
and everything is buttoned up and organized, for you to act, you know, to become a photojournalist? I mean, give us how that head feels for you. That's got to be strange, right? On some level.
Well, it's really, you know, shooting from the hip. Street photography, photojournalism is totally different than my years of, you know, being an advertising editorial photographer. But I have to say, I got into the street photography back in November. I took a weekend workshop at the ICP with Greg Miller, wonderful photographer, doing amazing work all the time. And there was a terrific TA there, Sonia Goidenko. And I just fell in love with her energy and spirit. And I ended up hiring her a couple times to go out with me and shoot the streets and learn even more. So I had been practicing a little bit in the fall and in January, and then when this hit, it was like, now I'm out on the street 3 times a week, shooting and then processing. So I've really sort of had a crash course, but I had a really good, solid introduction with the ICP, Greg Miller and Sonia Goidenko. Mm-hmm. This image is actually right in my neighborhood here in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. 3rd Avenue is the commercial strip, one of the commercial strips, the one that I shop the most on. And I started just taking my social distancing walks on 3rd Avenue because the bike path by the water going to the Verrazano was too packed with people. You couldn't social distance. So I decided I wanted to document my backyard, basically. And so some of the restaurants were open just for, takeout. And this is Gyro King. And so I have continued to document 3rd Avenue. So what happened was, the more I was going out during the pandemic, I started to build a library of images, and various themes emerged. And so I'm going to take you through the different themes. The first one, the mask, the all-important mask. And these images, the one on the left, you can see, like, some people, their masks are a little more playful. Some are your basic paper, the blue and white one. Some, you'll see some other examples, but the image on the right was right here in Bay Ridge. And I saw the billboard first, introducing our summer wardrobe, Corona Extra. And so I just stood there for a few minutes, and then this woman walked down the sidewalk, and I thought, oh my gosh, what an opportunity. And I just went past this billboard and they've taken it down. So I got there at the right time. This image, again, I liked this boy's mask. This was actually at a protest here in Brooklyn. But I found, like, wow, okay, you can get pretty graphic with it. This one, this woman wearing the very simple blue and white mask, and you can see she's wearing her gloves, she's all protected. And I at first just had the simple blue and white masks, and it really made me more depressed when I wore the paper mask, because it was like a reminder of something's wrong, sickness, bad health, and so I recruited my sister-in-law to make me some lovely masks with beautiful imagery. And so now I feel like I'm putting a hat on, like I'm not putting this medical mask on my face. The other thing is, this photo also in Bay Ridge, I asked this young woman if I could take a photograph, make a portrait of her, and she was all into it. I loved that she was out with her dog. And what I found was, when I asked people if I could, make a portrait, they would smile. You could see the smile behind the mask, because the smile would come through their eyes. They just would sparkle. And so I enjoyed, seeing their reactions. It's like a natural. Someone says they want to take your photo, you smile.
It must be amazing to come from that ICP class and have this landscape for yourself. I mean,
oh my God, amazing. Yeah. And this photo, I went over to Bushwick because I wanted to see, in Brooklyn, Frank, all the neighborhoods are so different, and Bushwick is very different from Bay Ridge. So I wanted to see what was happening over there. And here, this couple, walking down the street, and they were wearing the bandanas for their masks, and it just seemed more appropriate with their whole style. And so I enjoyed photographing them and seeing them on the street. This gentleman is wearing a double mask. So he's wearing the very simple blue and white one, but he, put the very cool graphic one over that. So it's a much cooler look. And also, I just noticed his t-shirt, "Turn Off the News." And I have to say, I saw the t-shirt and I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I have to turn off the news. It was just really getting to me. But seeing people, you know, making statements on their clothing as well was interesting. And then these two photos were down in Soho. The one on the left, a photographer, we were right in front of Prada, which is usually tourist central. Prada was, you know, their shades were drawn. The photographer was the only other person on the street, and we kind of nodded to each other, you know, like, you're a photographer, I'm a photographer, you know, we're on the street seeing this change. And so he agreed I could take his photo. The gentleman on the right is actually a homeless gentleman, and I asked him if I could make a portrait. He agreed to it, and he really got into it. He got into the body language, the, you know, signage, the hand sign. And I have to say, down in Soho, which is a major tourist area, restaurants, bars, retail, all closed, no tourists. So the only people I saw there were the FedEx people, the UPS people, homeless people, a few residents, and the only places were open were the bodegas and maybe a bank, but their hours were kind of weird. So I really worry about the homeless people right now and how they're gonna get through this. Just a couple more on the masks. I found it, you know, kind of ironic, the big Gucci painted billboard on the side of a building, a big, you know, toothy smile, and the delivery guy with his mask on, riding by. The two images together were quite ironic. The woman on the right was, I photographed her in Chinatown. The next theme is isolation. And I found, you know, people were alone. They were doing things by themselves. This stark sense of quiet and being alone. This was Coney Island. Another Coney Island, I went out right when there was this big storm and it was very, very foggy. And I felt like it just made it even more eerie that there's nobody at Coney Island. And even on a rainy day, people will go there. But just seeing, you know, the singular man walking. This was a guy on the boardwalk in his velomobile, which is a human powered, like a bike thing, with his mask, and he was just riding around the boardwalk. But you can see behind, the shops are closed. In this series, you can see the starkness of Coney Island, the rides. I mean, nothing, you know, the rides aren't open, and or the one skating towards the Wonder Wheel, and you know, you can.
Is this a career possible change to get more into this and away from the commercial space?
I have to say, I'm loving it.
You're not going to make any money, Carol.
No, there's no money. I'm eating cat food with my cats, but it's the creative freedom I feel, and I guess, frankly, in New York City, Brooklyn, for 36 years, and I'm just now starting to see New York, because being a street photographer, you have to be so alert. You're constantly looking at things. It's constant, you know, theater happening right in front of your eyeballs. So I walk around eyes wide open, you know, just absorbing and again, having the camera ready to go when I see something. And there are some times when it's like, oh my God, I just missed a great shot. We still continue, you know, advertising and editorial, but I'm actually, you know, building on my website a section with more stories, which is more related to street.
Kim put a note in here about how you're processing the images, and you know, what did you want to achieve in that processing?
So I use Lightroom. I import the files into Lightroom. I'm shooting in color because there are times when I feel like color works better, so I don't want to set my camera to shoot strictly black and white. And I do minimal processing. Some of these, like the Coney Island, it was a very bright day. And so I liked it more contrasty. So I would make some adjustments for that. And also I like the rich black and white. I feel like it works better for this series.
Right.
So this was in, did that answer the person's question?
I think that's fine.
Good, okay. And so the next image was in Bushwick, and this isolation, you know, this woman was just sitting on the metal stairs, and I found like the big, you know, painting artwork on the wall, just so gigantic. And she's this tiny little object almost, you know, on the staircase. And Bushwick Collective, I mean, it's amazing in Bushwick to walk around there and just see the artwork. You know, the warehouses are canvases, blank canvases for the street artists. It's great to see. Now this image was Chinatown, and this is Doyers Street. I was with Sonia in the fall, and we went to Chinatown. It's one of her favorite places to shoot, and she took me there and showed me Doyers Street. When we were there, it was swarming with people. Like, you couldn't even get around. I mean, there was just such a buzz happening. And now I was there during the pandemic, and I was looking for people. Like, where is everyone? Well, they certainly aren't on Doyers Street. And it made, again, for this very eerie feeling of where is the life, you know? So another theme, social distancing, another very important one. And this was Coney Island, and the Keep This Far Apart sign. The Parks Department has put these signs up all over the city, reminding people what 6 feet looks like. And I just found this, you know, contrast between the Keep This Far Apart and the group on the bench, hardly doing their social distancing. Yet we have these 3 folks on the move on the boardwalk at Coney Island. And it's almost like exact social distancing there. So they were spot on with their social distancing. The beach, I found there were very few people on the beach. Again, you want to take a walk and social distance. The Coney Island beach was great. And I found this woman and her dog, they did a good job of social distancing. Another shot in Brooklyn, I found the sunlight coming through the subway tracks, creating this graphic, almost like paths. And I felt like, oh, these are, you know, they're keeping their distance between one another. They're on the right path. And I just thought it was a dynamic graphic shot. The other thing, people were being creative about, you know, reminding people about social distancing. This was in Bushwick, where a small restaurant put these spray painted hearts with the 6 feet just as a reminder for people. And it just was fun. You know, it just made it a little less oppressive. And I did stop at Grand Central. That was really pretty crazy. Just not seeing anybody in Grand Central was just so strange. I actually went down on the platform to the trains, and there would be just a handful of people coming off the trains. It was just not.
No, I really love this image because you can see the time. You know, it's the 3:03, which of course, you know, at that time, Grand Central would be packed, right?
Exactly. And also you can see in the upper right corner, you know, they posted, you know, big signs about, you know, wearing your masks. You know, there were police walking around, but I mean, you know what Grand Central is, with the amount of scurrying people, and this just at a standstill. It was crazy. The essential workers are heroes. I photographed a variety of heroes, and this gentleman works at Regina's grocery down in the Lower East Side. And when I photographed him, they weren't open to the public for takeout. They were making food for the hospital, so they were feeding the essential workers. And he agreed to let me make a portrait of him. And I have to say, they make the most amazing sandwiches. He and his mom, and the food's amazing. So they are now, you know, doing the drive-by pickup and takeout. Memorial Day, I decided I wanted to go and see the nurses, and at the 7 p.m. clapping time. So I went up to Lenox Hill Hospital, and the nurses, some of the nurses come out during the clap, during the tribute, and I was so happy to be there. And I have a niece, a nurse up in Hartford, so it's been upsetting knowing that she's treating COVID patients, and so I felt like I wanted to be there for the nurses. And I asked this young nurse if I could make a portrait, and she agreed. And again, you can just see her smile beaming through her eyes. And I am in touch with, I give my business card to some of the people who have agreed to have their portrait taken, so that if they want the files, I can send them the files. So they are getting the files. I did a whole, you know, evening of photographing the nurses. You know, there was the American flags, people were singing, it was great. Back at Grand Central, the conductor keeps, you know, the train going. You know, the train was for essential workers pretty much. They were encouraging, you know, essential workers use the commuter train. So he agreed to a portrait, and he got the files and loved them. This guy is in Bay Ridge at a restaurant called Ammonia that has the most amazing pastries, and all the chairs were up on the tables, you know, shut down. Again, a very strange sight. Back at Coney Island on the weekend, they opened up, some of the food vendors opened up, and it just made me happy to see cotton candy and candied apples. And this young gal agreed to a portrait. This is at Williams Candy. And again, you can just kind of see that smile behind her mask. And back in Bay Ridge at Anthony's Butcher Shop, you can see what restaurants and food stores were starting to do, like makeshift takeout counters, you know, or takeout windows. And they created this setup so that people could call in an order and then just come by and pick it up. No one goes in the store, very safe. These are a couple more folks in the restaurants. The Got Gyro at Gyro King in my neighborhood in Bay Ridge. And I just found with the reflection shooting through the window and the reflection of the apartments across the street, the two windows created his eyes. And I just think he's like, you know, he looks like an alien, you know, alien gyro guy. But sometimes like you'll get a little surprise like this when I'm processing. I'll notice little details that may not have been so, you know, obvious when I was taking the photo. The top right is at Katz's Deli in Lower East Side. The bottom is Pete making some pizzas. And then these two folks, you know, they're cleaning. The guy on the left was cleaning his foyer in Soho, and the woman on the right cleaning the ATMs at a bank. Another theme is signs. And what I found was people would just make these crude, you know, handmade, homemade signs and just tape them to their business doors and windows. This one is in my neighborhood. It's a flower shop, McAteer Florist. And what I loved what they did was when this all first started, they had buckets of flowers that were just going to die in the store because it was closed. And so what they did, they put the flowers out in front and they put this sign on their window. You know, it was their way of spreading joy and, you know, hoping everyone stays safe. So I thought that was really pretty cool. Also wandering around, you would see makeshift memorials in the neighborhoods. This in the Lower East Side, I need more Jimmy. And reading the note here, you could tell Jimmy was really loved by, you know, the folks in his neighborhood. And, you know, what you don't see here are flowers, candles, all kinds of written notes that were on the sidewalk in front of his store. This one I found really inspiring. It's very sad in terms of, well, you know, you can't rent a tuxedo for the prom. There's no prom. You're not going on cruises, no graduation, the weddings. All of that was so sad. But I liked what this tuxedo store did. They turned it around. You know, why not rent a tux and have a candlelit dinner at home, you know, with your girlfriend, boyfriend, or spouse. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then with the curbside pickup, you could get your case of wine. This in Chinatown, we are closed until government notices. So, yeah.
You know, it's interesting watching you know, listening to you and seeing the images, you know, just from the mental space of what you've always shot to now being so emotionally involved in this new photography. That's got to be something different for you as well as an experience.
Frank, great. Yes, it's totally different. And, you know, to be, you know, I photographed the Mermaid Parade. Okay, totally different, you know, street photography, but totally different. It's fun, colorful, bright, to a very sad documentation of this. And I have to say that I've needed to give myself some timeouts because I've gotten into a bad headspace because I'm out shooting. So I'm right in the midst, I'm seeing it firsthand, but then as I'm processing the images, I'm living in the actual where I've taken the photo, and then I'm reliving that by, you know, looking at all the photos, processing them, organizing them. It's like, you know, the amount of time, it's really emotionally draining. So yes, this has affected me much more in an emotional way than the advertising.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I have a lot of, you know, good friends who are photojournalists who've covered war and famine and things like that, and they tell me, you know, when they come home, it is a real shock to the system, you know, to be here and there, and then all of a sudden you're walking along, you know, 2nd Avenue, getting, you know, a slice of pizza. Like those two worlds really collide, and you really have to watch out for that.
Yes.
You know, because that can create real problems for you. So I was just
Yeah.
wondering how you were dealing with that.
Well, I have to say, when I go to Coney Island, looking at the water and just walking by the water and sitting there, that's like a little kind of recharging. And just I'm lucky to have a little garden in my backyard. I can go and sit out there and try and relax a little bit. But it is definitely totally different, Frank. And then just the last theme I want to share with everyone, use gloves. So this is kind of gross, but I have to tell you, I was walking down the 3rd Avenue in Bay Ridge a month or so ago, and the street was so dirty. Like the garbage was falling out of the garbage containers, and I started, stuff was on the street, and as I was walking and looking down, I saw all of these used gloves scattered, strewn on the street. And I just started to look, and I saw like little stories, like where the glove was next to something. You know, I'm loving it, the McDonald's and the cigarettes and the glove, the plastic on plastic, you know, opening that lid from your takeout food. You know, the plastic, the glove with the plastic takeout food utensils, you know, wrapped in plastic. And so I just put a little grid together. You can, you know, see different masks, the black and white, gloves together. The one on the bottom right corner is actually a grocery list in Spanish. And then the one on the bottom far left, just the shapes kind of were mimicking each other. So again, just really watching, you know, what was happening on the street. And so, you know, I hope these images will, you know, soon be curiosities and once in a lifetime, you know, scenes receding into the past, and that, you know, this version of our city will be fleeting, and that, you know, but right now this is what I see, and I'll continue this project because we're only in New York. We're just in our first phase of coming back to life. So it's going to be interesting to see how things will unfold as the phases open up. And so I love New York, and I thank New York for taking care of New York. Stay safe, New York. And here's some info if anyone is interested in seeing more work on my website. And I also post on Instagram at Carol Dronsfield Photography. So, so
Carol,
that's.
Yeah, Carol, your work is really stunning. I mean, and watching you go from this, you know, from your journey as a photographer is absolutely fascinating. So we're thrilled that you decided to share with us. And you know, I have to say, so many of those images, it would be great to hear from those people, especially at the restaurants, you know, in the neighborhood. If you see those, if you feel compelled to do some video of those folks, that would be great for our special evening, you know, which is on the 24th.
Right, right. That's great. Yeah.
Because it really sounds like you ingratiated yourself into this world, and what more, you know, what better thing than to get feedback from them, you know, their voice.
Yes, yes. And also just, you know, I'm thinking about where this goes and, you know, what do I do with this library of imagery? A couple things. I may donate to the either New York or Brooklyn Historical Society. I would love to do something right in my neighborhood, some kind of a show, invite these people who are in my photos, give them a print, any of my, you know, neighborhood acquaintances, you know, do something for them. I mean, they're all having a tough time.
That would be great. Giving back is what it's all
Yes.
about. So we thank you very much, Carol.
Well, and I thank you, Frank and Cliff, for the opportunity to hang out with you guys.
No,
And the audience for tuning in to this. Enjoy the next two photographers. They're great.
and you know, we'll have you back.
Thank you so much. I'd love to be back.
So we're going to take just a few minute break for everyone to get a glass of water or do whatever they'd like to do. And then we'll be coming back with Kevin Steele. So everyone, we'll see you in just a couple of minutes. Really powerful work. Beautiful. Really beautiful. For everyone who's there, just a couple of bits of information. If you joined late, we're doing a quick turnaround on June 16th, which is next Tuesday. We have another projections with another incredible body of work from three terrific photographers: Bruce Byers, Stefan Folka, and Paul Anarsu. So we're really excited about that. You should also know we've moved back the deadline to June 19th for the video submissions for the essential workers that we've been talking about. And if anyone has any questions about that, you can email me or fire away. But that night of presentation will be June 24th, which promises to be absolutely spectacular, to actually hear from the people who are putting themselves in harm's way so that we could have a little bit of a normal existence. So we're going to be saluting all those heroes.
And Frank, if I can chime in there for a second too, just want to remind everyone, if you can, shoot them horizontally. I've gotten a lot of vertical videos. It's not that big of an issue, but if you can. But also know, most importantly, you don't have to be there in person. You can keep your social distancing. You can do this remotely as well, or you can just ask the person, the essential worker, simply just to record themselves. Right? What we're trying to do is just capture the voice of the people who are in harm's way and share their voice directly from themselves. So you don't have to physically be there. If you are there, that's great, but don't feel like you need to. You can reach out to either one of us. We can give you any of the details or questions you may have, but we definitely do want to encourage you. We've got a lot of submissions so far, but we want to encourage you to keep on submitting. All right, having said that, I'm going to stop the share here for a second. We're going to head back in to the event. Make this full screen here. And let's see if we can get our next presenter up and running. Frank, you want to take it away there?
Yes. We now have Kevin Steele, who's out of Los Angeles, who's joining us, an old friend for a long time. And Kevin, it's all you.
Thank you, Frank, and hi, everybody. Really appreciate the opportunity to present this work. It's been pretty important to me in this time, and great to be presenting alongside you, Carol. That was beautiful work, and Timothy, I've seen some of your stuff and looking forward to seeing it here. So, do I share my screen now, Clifford? Is this
Yes, you can share your screen.
Share screen. Here we go, and that would be this. Okay, and so again, Kevin Steele, I'm an advertising photographer based in Los Angeles. I'm going to show you a little bit of my background before diving into this project. And I'm not going full screen because I think that actually has a problem with this camera that I'm using. It locks it up. But advertising photographer based in Los Angeles. In the time that everything shut down, I started a personal project about 11 weeks ago, documenting life in quarantine. Basically, self-isolation, shooting through the front door, very wide lens, revealing life apart and together into a space. And At this point, there's about 70 scenes that I've shot in the last 11 weeks, all individual residences and homes or cars, wherever anybody is living. And there's a project page on Instagram at life.onpause. So let me just start rolling the presentation here, I think, if I go here. So my work is full of life and color. I think, I don't know if you can see the screen, or I'm only showing one page. Are you actually just seeing the Clifford?
No, we're seeing it.
No,
okay.
we can see the whole thing. You're good.
Gotcha,
Yep.
Great. And advertising, people and places, but that's not how I got started. Back in the 1990s, I started really as a documentary photographer, shooting my adventures climbing. And this was a way for me to describe my world to others. I was a pretty serious climber in the late 80s, early 90s, and through the 90s. And photography was a way for me to share my experiences, and then also start to produce an income through Outside Magazine, National Geographic, dedicated climbing magazines and the outdoor brands. But it wasn't the full-on produced advertising photography. It would be used for stock, it would be used for editorial, photo essays, but my life was really about documenting the world around me, almost in a journalistic fashion. My friends, the activities that I would pursue. So it was my passion, and I had to have day jobs along the side so that I could actually make a living, until such a point that I was able to do my first advertising gig, which is what this was. I was actually on the nose of Jefferson. This was for an advertising shoot on Mount Rushmore. And this was my entry into the world of advertising photography. It was a national campaign in 2003 for a brand in the company that makes rescue equipment for police, SWAT, fire departments, search and rescue, etc. And it kind of opened my eyes to that world of stepping up from just shooting for myself to shooting for advertising clients. And then that led, a few years later into some higher produced shoots. This is actually a personal shot after we shot an American Express campaign on the island of St. Lucia. But I stayed on the island for some time afterward, just because it's amazing, beautiful, and working with the local crew and just going around the island, creating a personal portfolio, just because I didn't have a job on the backside of that. Why not stay where this is? So my work is, it's authentic but fairly produced, and it's full of color. It's all about people and places. A lot of it in travel, hospitality, sometimes health and wellness, pharmaceutical, and a lot of it looking like it's very authentic, but actually there's a production team around me to do this. So in a sense, when everything shut down in early March, bids went away, jobs went away, not to come back very soon. I was wondering, what can I do? This is a whole new thing that is going on right here. This is a scary time. There was a lot of anxiety. That first week after the shutdown, it was in the shutdown. I mean, like when national emergency was declared, March 13th or so, and all of a sudden, all the airlines were stopping, and everybody was stopping and saying, "Okay, we're working at home." And then in Los Angeles, it was the first location in California in Los Angeles actually to say shelter at home. And that was the idea for this project began literally the day after the national emergency was declared. And the concept was, as I said, it was basically shooting through the front door. So, going into people's lives from outside in, showing the barrier, the physical barrier as a place that we're looking from outside in, to where they are self-isolating. So in quarantine, in this first week, it was anxiety. It wasn't like uncertain to what the future would bring. And in addition
Kevin, how did that idea get born? Or do you know?
I totally know. It was a conversation with my wife at some points, with my agent at other points, but really, what can I do that has impact? What can I do that has, that gives meaning to what we're living through right now? And little did we know. I had no idea it was going to last as long as it has. None of us did. At this point, week one, we're thinking, this will be over in some weeks, maybe a month, maybe two at the most. No one really knew. And So this was literally in that moment when everybody is wondering what is going on, what is happening. And I knew that I needed to document it because it comes back to my roots of really explaining the world around me in a way that helps me also process it and share it. And I think a key thing for this was stripping back to the essentials. So I purposefully decided one camera, one lens, super wide lens, and to make these fairly quick and to be very mindful of social distancing. I'm wearing a mask. I've got gloves at that time, gloves, Clorox wipes, and it's, traveling very light and very simply. Most of these scenes and shoots are done in about 15 minutes, maybe even 10 minutes. Another thing
Kevin, that's got to be a little bit weird, right? That you're doing these shots in 10 minutes where the setups that you do for advertising are hours and hours. Yeah,
and it's night and day, and it's wonderful. I mean, it is very freeing. I mean, I think, Carol mentioned the same thing. I prefer to work with a small crew. I mean, my ideal is to be, very light, nimble, and, I get it done very quickly. But the reality of advertising commercial productions is you have a production team, you've got wardrobe, makeup, you have client approvals, you've got art director, you have a lot of things happening on set, which you do your job and you be as creative as you can, and you deliver more than they expect. You deliver what they need, and then you deliver more with the time you've got left to really push it outside the box. But in the end, you are satisfying the client. You are producing something toward a brief, toward a deck, toward a concept. In this sense, the concept was very clear to me. It was creating something where I'm looking at how people's lives are from the outside in, and whether that's through a front door, in this case, through a balcony on a penthouse over the Staples Center in downtown Los Angeles, or sometimes through a window, if the front door wasn't really available. But it's really having that barrier of isolation to really illustrate how this is an isolating process that we're going through. The other thing that I did was then ask them just a few sentences, or a short paragraph of how they're feeling, not who they are or what they do. I'm not including anyone's last names. It's more or less really about how you're feeling. And some people, as you'll see as we go through here, are fairly open with what this means to them, and how either they are enjoying it, or how they are hating it, or how they are afraid, or other fears which come in. So it's a very kind of cathartic process, and I have received a lot of emails and comments from people who are looking at the work and feeling inspired by it, to actually get a view, almost voyeuristic, into somebody's place of shelter, right, to see how they are dealing with it. And I'm not sure if your screens are large enough to read the text down below, but
yeah, we get it.
Okay, good. And so this is Sade, an actor and model that I am familiar with. This started off with shooting friends. And in the beginning, it was friends, and then friends of friends, and friends refer friends. And then at some point, people started approaching me and hearing about the project. And so I've shot about 70 now, and it's still going on, although this last week, because of what is going on, I've been fully supporting the protests and out there here in Los Angeles. So this Life on Pause is literally on pause at this moment, but hopefully is going to start up again, because we're still in self-isolation, even though we're starting to move out, starting to come out of our spaces. And so these were all shot with medium format, and it's with a 28mm lens, which effectively on a 35 camera would be about 17.5 millimeters. Natural light, there is no assistant, there's no lighting set up. It's basically just a medium format camera, and sometimes sticks, a tripod if the light is pretty low. But being nimble. I mean, in this case, I'm actually probably kind of standing in a tree just outside their garden here to get this shot. And I love the stories that people have provided along with this. I mean, the story behind this one, this was actually, I went to shoot Flavio, who delivers our, he's a pharmacy, compounding pharmacy, delivers medications for us. from my wife. And conversation with him led to, hey, can I shoot you at where you live, which is, you know, an apartment kind of in East Hollywood. And then this woman here who's a musician, touring musician, was in the apartment above him. And, you know, she was curious to see what was going on. I said, hey, can I come shoot you? And so a lot of this is impromptu and literally 5 to 10 minutes of view through the front door. And inevitably, you know, people have pets, and often you open a front door and the animals are going to be right there. It's you know, humorous how many times, you know, the cats are in frame, just like creeping through, trying to get through my legs, you know, as I'm kneeling down at the front door. You know, I'm in just outside the front door. In most cases, I don't go any more than like a foot inside the door. I'm always trying to keep the door as part of the frame, just to show context of looking from the outside in. And these aren't in chronological order. This is actually an order of about 26 images, which are on my website. It's now the landing page of my website. And the whole set of 70 is on Instagram chronologically. David, who is a photographer, this is actually shot, I think, on day 2 of like when we were hunkered down. And literally within 5 minutes, he said he was heading out the door to go get on the road and drive to Utah with his family to shelter in Utah. I'm not sure if he's back yet. And purposefully really trying to get a wide range of society. I mean, really trying to get everything from, I'm not showing it here, but a hairstylist living out of her van to a home, you know, a nice home here in Manhattan Beach. And, you know, trying to show the wide variety of how people are adapting to, you know, the quarantine, what they're doing in this time, and how they're handling it. You know, it's interesting, kind of when I look at it chronologically and think of, you know, the early week or early 2 weeks, and it's almost like the stages of grief. You know, early on, it's the denial, the anxiety, you know, people are afraid, and as it progressed through a month and then a second month, and then it becomes more about, you know, how people are living, you know, acceptance. We are accepting the fact that we are doing this, and we've adjusted our lives, and, you know, life is moving forward. You know, for some people, it's, you know, reconnecting with their family in a way which is, you know, looks very wholesome. And another scene you're going to see, I think, in a little bit, it's like complete chaos. It's a frenzied couple who are now having to work from home and have like kids at home where they have to homeschool, and you know, there's spaghetti on the walls and there's toys all over the floor, and it's you know, everyone has a different reality through this, and I think it's just really interesting to kind of take snapshots and document, you know, how life is and was being lived through this.
This image feels a little bit like it was produced with all the lights on. You know,
well, I mean, certainly I have the option to say, can you please turn the lights on? Because as I'm looking through and I'm saying, hey, but it's no, it's just me and standing on the other end. Actually, I'm standing in the pool at this point. There's a shallow pool, and I'm in the water.
They say you could walk on water, Kevin.
I have pictures of that. Yeah, more often falling in the water, but. So this is, I just mentioned Flavio, who delivers our prescriptions. My wife has an illness, and he's, at this time, as we've gotten to know, the pharmacy delivery guy, and wonderful person. And opening his door, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Just look at this scene. This is, you know, his bed is in the back room. He's completely comfortable in this space. At this time, you know, this was still fairly early in the process, and masks were hard to come by. But he's, you know, his job is to deliver to people's homes, and so you kind of see right behind his hoodie there's a, you know, a bunch of masks hanging on hanging on something there. And the gloves, and just everything going on in here. And I love the calmness in his gaze and the look. And of course, without any lighting, sometimes the best light is just filtered light coming through a door, coming through a window. Just very beautiful. I can't see the chat window, by the way. So if Frank, if anyone has questions, just give me a heads up and I'm happy to answer. Yeah, Sherry and her son. She worked for a travel agency and was really anxious because she was about to get on a Zoom call, where she expected to be let go after this shot. There's a lot of stories, a lot of life being lived, and a lot of uncertain times. It was and is still a very uncertain time for many people, myself included. What is the world going to look like in a world of commercial production and advertising? We know that brands are changing and shifting. Editorial is more and more difficult. I mean, certainly we're coming into a time where it has given everyone a sense of reality, of strip away things which were making our days busy, and it distills life down to some very core essentials of really what's important. And that's a message that I heard from people over and over again. Like Luke here. Luke was a musician out of Nashville. He had just moved to Venice Beach the month before. He was a touring musician, worked with some, we would know exactly who they are if I told you their names, on stage, touring with country western acts. And he was just about to get started in LA, and then he's got to stay in his room. He's got a 1-bedroom in Venice. So I couldn't really shoot through the front door, but I climbed up on a ladder and shot through his window. And I like what he said, spend time within yourself, rest. It's brought a different kind of inspiration, not having anywhere to be. Maybe a blessing in disguise for the creative side of things. So Luke was a friend of a friend, and I keep in touch with a lot of the people that I photographed. Luke has since, gone back to Minnesota, where his home is, because clearly it wasn't the right time to make a break in Los Angeles. He'll be back, I guess, when when it is time. So here's the yin and yang of that family that you said, Frank, looks like it's highly produced, the beautiful Manhattan Beach.
Yeah, there you go.
And, this reminds me of Where the Wild Things Are. And I just love the chaos in this. Pure, just pure life going on. And you can see the mom, the intensity, as she's, with the younger, and just the stuff on the high chair and the food scattered, and poor dad, kind of just looking over like, yeah, I should be at the office right now, would be at the office right now. But the first sentence,
create, right? This you cannot recreate.
Aaron and Ben, this has been an extraordinarily difficult time. It's nonstop energy, complete chaos. We're challenged in some ways, but blessed in a lot.
Kevin, how long do you stay there for? Are you shooting a series of shots? Are you waiting for a specific moment?
Literally never more than 15 minutes. And I will, maybe do 2 different setups, but if it's like this, and when I say setups, I mean if there's an option of looking through a window and through the door, I might try both, but never more than 10 minutes on each. And then I'll stay afterward, outside the door with mask on, and kind of ask them, how they're feeling. And I'll record it on my iPhone because I don't want them to spend time writing. I'll record, and then I'll say, I'm going to transcribe this, and just fire it back to you as a text, and so you can make any changes if you're uncomfortable with it. Because some people were pretty raw and real with what they were saying, and I want to make sure that they're okay with that. And then they'll be okay, and then I'll typically post it within a couple of days.
And are you asking them? Are you sharing these images with them before you post? Has anyone had any objections? Okay.
No. There has been no objections, and I consider it. I consider it not a right, but a privilege to say that, I will choose the image that I feel like best reflects, but I will certainly what they're saying, their own words, because a lot of time that's, pure, their raw, feeling, that I will bounce that off of them. Let them have, creative control over what they say. Most people are fine with it. They might change a few things, or, that seems a little superficial. Someone might say, take that out, please, when they think about it. But, one of my favorite photographers, and definitely an inspiration, Dan Winters, famously known for, in the early days, he would deliver, boom, there's one print, 8x10 handed to the editor. That's the shot. Certainly can't do that in my advertising world, but in this case, I feel like I know what the shot is, and often it's just trying to get that moment. The gesture, as Jay Mizell, another great inspiration to me. That gesture, that moment where you have like this, everything just happening in one instant of time, like here.
Yeah.
And so, this is kind of moving more toward that acceptance phase. This is kind of maybe, about a month ago. So we're like a couple of months into the pandemic, and, monopoly and family life, certainly kind of moved away from kind of the fear and, life fraught with uncertainty. So these are shot color, of course, and then I process black and white. This was early on. Ingo Zinka, who was a referral. So this is kind of how it worked. My wife, months ago, took an Uber ride from somebody, and my wife is extremely social and very outgoing. And talking with her Uber driver, who was, from New York. I'm also from New York. My wife is Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia. So we're kind of East Coast attitudes. I'm maybe more California attitude, but I'm from New York. And the connection to this person was kind of three degrees of the Uber driver. My wife, kept in touch with, and then she said she would be perfect for your project. But it was that person who I then shot. I don't think I have that image here. And then that led to another person who led to this person. And it was all happening so fast in that first week that I didn't really have time to look people up or really understand what they were doing. I just knew that she was, somehow a fashion person in downtown LA. And I get there and realize as I open the door, oh, so you're a stylist, you've got bolts of fabric on the floor, and realize, this is the point at which masks were in high demand. We're being told not to wear masks. If you can recall back in those first few weeks, it's like, you don't need to wear masks, save them for the healthcare workers. And so this was actually beginning of producing masks, making masks, and she was donating and shipping these around the country. First to her home in Arkansas, where all of the rest of her family is in the healthcare industry. She's the only one who was not in healthcare or in the medical field. So she was shipping them back to her family to distribute. But I just thought it was so wonderful, like, coming into something and then realizing, oh my gosh, you're making masks. And that is so poignant for kind of this point in time. We look back on it and say, well, masks are everywhere now, and it's a fashion statement. And go ahead, Frank.
No, just someone put a question in there. Since you're mentioning shooting in color, then processing to gray, can you share your path of how you came that way?
Yeah, well.
Great question, Lawrence.
Great question. I actually was, when I thought about this project, my ideal would have been to shoot with a monochrome back. And a digital back, or also like a Leica monochrome, but I didn't have access to it. I asked and couldn't. So I have a phase 1 that I use for my commercial work and shot with that. So the workflow is through Capture One, and then going into silver effects in Photoshop to really have control of the black and white tonality, and then round trip back to Capture One. Not a lot of processing. It's really just keeping even smooth tones through Capture One, full dynamic range, and then working with the color filters in black and white, and mainly contrast and curves to get the image the way I want it. Not a lot of time spent. I'm not laboring over this for dates, like, because I'm doing a fast turn, 70 images. That's like I'm doing 7 a week, and I have other things to do as well. There's not a lot of things going on, but it's amazing how busy you can be even if you're not doing jobs. But I think that's life for a lot of people. We realize, even though we are not maybe doing, what we are normally doing these days, there's still the days go by. Yeah, so this really underscored for me the kind of the serendipity of coming into a situation, which I love about the editorial and the journalistic aspect of this. Walking into her downtown LA building down on Spring Street near 6th, and just boom, a world opens up before me. I have no idea in most cases what I'm going to see. So it's like on the fly, got to get the shot. What am I looking at compositionally? How am I seeing the shot? Ask her to close those blinds behind me, glaring light coming back in. In this case, I'm actually helping her produce that. There's a lamp that she has that I actually just moved over. So can you kind of move that floor lamp just out of, because her skin is so black, to move out of just behind the doorway so I can get some illumination on her face. And then just asking her, can you hold the mask for me? Just like, honor the mask. And that was it. So, 13 minutes before this, I just had a black door in front of me, knocking on it with my gloved hand, and not knowing what I'm going to see or what to expect. And that I love. That's kind of the creative process in its essence. So this was also an early shot. This is also the first week of the pandemic, and this is an actor, mainly model. I've used him actually on a shoot that we did in New York, but he since moved out of New York to Los Angeles, and we've kept in touch. And he's a Brit, wonderful, cheeky attitude. He's, very, very charming guy, and is renting this place in Topanga Canyon, which is kind of in the wilds, just outside of Los Angeles, just above Malibu. And he has this outdoor shower, and I just thought, boy, this would be wonderful just to make this shot. So, it's careful positioning, obviously, the table. And then, of course, aligning myself with where that door is and the handle of the door, so you're not seeing me, kind of squishing myself into the width of that, piece of 2x4, so you don't see my reflection.
But the beautiful reflections of the mountains in the back.
Yeah, so you can see he's looking out, down canyon to the ocean. It's a wonderful, wild setting. Reminds me of it's T.C. Boyle, an author. He lives in Santa Barbara, and wrote Tortilla Curtain, a bunch of other great novels, more documentary. And one story that he wrote, which is a short story, was after the plague, and it was the literary story of a writer who goes up into the mountains of California into a log cabin to basically isolate so he can write his novel, and shelters for 2 months and comes back out, and the world is decimated. The world has gone through a plague, and so he is like now making his way back to the coast from the mountains, and eventually finds like there are other people who survived, but it's kind of a story that comes to mind when I think of this. T.C. Boyle. This is also a referral. This is Jerry. Jerry is famous for writing AOC's campaign song. And when she came to visit Los Angeles, she came up and gave him lots of hugs, because Jerry is 98 years old, just finished a book. And it was somebody else who I was photographing who said, "Oh, have you heard of Jerry?" And I said, "No." And Jerry Rosenblum, and called Jerry. Jerry said, I can't call you right now. I'm getting out of the shower. I'll call you right back. And Jerry called right back. He doesn't text, but he called this person right back as I'm waiting there. And the person explained, I've got this photographer here who's doing this project. And Jerry, who was like, super sweet guy, said, "Oh, absolutely. Come on by." And he was 10 minutes away in Santa Monica, living in the Salvation Army building, kind of a senior folks home. But just full of stories. He is just a jokester. At 98, he has the heart of a 68-year-old, and his skin looks like it's on a 78-year-old. He has like no wrinkles, and keeps joking about it. Like, that's his quote here. The first shot that I did of him, because this was in the first week and everything was grim, I was literally asking people, like, think about how you're feeling now. Don't smile. This isn't a portrait of you smiling. Think about deeply like what we're going through. And he paused and he gave me like a stern look. And that's the image that I posted. And everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, I've never seen Jerry without a smile." And so I went back a few weeks later and replaced his image with one where it's true to character, because I felt that, this is his essence. This is really Jerry. So also friends, and in some cases I'll ask them. So her husband, boyfriend rather, was sitting on the couch, and I thought, you know, Graham, maybe you can just kind of walk over to the door. I can kind of, you know, get you in the shot, maybe look back a little bit. I'm not directing too much. You know, I also do direct commercials, but this is really more about just trying to make them feel comfortable and then quickly work within a composition that makes it feel to me, but without feeling posed, just natural. Yeah, and I think it's very real to feel, you know, for people to express how they're feeling through this. You know, this is Donato and Taisha. So this was the middle of the connection from the Uber driver. Uber driver's friend was Taisha here, and then Taisha, her friend, was Ngozika, who did who made the masks. Taisha was pregnant and visibly pregnant, and had not told anybody yet, and she didn't want to spill the beans. So that's why she's holding the dog there and kind of has her arm there. So it kind of, you can't quite tell that she has, you know, that she is pregnant. And I just love, I love working with, I did this with Sade in that early shot. I think it was the second one. She's the tall African-American, you know, her reflection in the mirror, side profile, and then she's looking almost with the kind of the Jesus, the Mary hand up as the light is coming through. So I love working with what I can find. And again, it's like, I don't know what's going to happen when I open the front door, but I see this and I can get the camera right close to that, so I can like work with these split fields and try to make a composition that's really, you know, pulling it together. And when there are mirrors, I can, you know, get multiple views out of one image, kind of showing, you know, showing the emotion, showing what's going on. And often it's, you know, it's you guys all understand, it's the frame between the frames. It's that shot where, you know, they can hear your mirror go, they can hear the shutter, and you know, she's involved. She's, you know, in the industry of you know, film and can understand, okay, I'm modeling or can know how to be for the camera, but I like to get them when they're not expecting it. And this is one of those where I saw him joking, and she like was about to, you know, something joking back, and there was this instant, boom, that look of care and kind of compassion, looking up to him and knowing that they have a baby. And it wasn't a month later that she then announced it to the world. Bob and Bob, this was a little setup. This is a friend of a friend. And they were going crazy and said, hey, we just want, you know, we're jujitsu. We are going nuts over here. We just want you to come over. We're going to get ready. We're going to like enact some jujitsu scenes, and I'd just love for you to shoot us. And so, you know, this was one where it wasn't like opening a door and saying, okay, you know, what would you like me to do? They had thought about, you know, how they wanted to be, but in the end, I used a shot which wasn't what they wanted. It was a shot which kind of showed just the craziness of their situation. The shot they wanted was them actually wrestling, which, you know, there's a shotgun there, there's a whiskey on the table, there's, you know, half-eaten breakfast, there's, I don't know, other things hiding in the background, which they were just, you know, making this scene. So, you know, it goes across all bounds here of kind of what gets revealed. This is also early on, maybe day 2 or day 3, an artist friend. You know, and in the first week, I was probably shooting, you know, up to 5 people a day. Maybe a day, taking a break, shooting a day, because I was very concerned about, you know, I don't want to be out there every day. You know, literally coming into my home was an airlock. Stripping all my clothes off, you know, going in like, you know, alcohol, and, you know, everything was, who knows what's going on, like how contagious is this? We've relaxed since then, you know, but generally I have to think back to the anxiety from myself, you know, bringing myself to someone's door was, you know, disconcerting enough to many people, but then also coming back home and thinking like, you know, I'm out in the world. I am, you know, somebody who really I could be, you know, I'm going to lots of places, 5 different people in a day. You know, I'm being extremely careful. So it's like, in those first days, shooting 5 people and then, you know, zipping around town, a lot of it in our neighborhood, but then having to drive maybe 30 minutes to another place, Hollywood, downtown. But literally catching a mood of, like what she says here, stripping work down to its essence during this pandemic. It's easier to do. I don't think no one ever may see it because we may all die. I mean, that fatalistic attitude that we had of what is going on in the world. This is a plague, which who knows what's going to happen. We had no handle on it back in those early days. I mean, remember, I was riveted. As I would be driving, I would have Governor Cuomo's press conference on the radio, because he was the best source of information daily. And then Trump would come on right after, and I'd just shut that off. But I'm being too political here, but you understand where I'm coming from. We were all, you know, eager for information. This is Carol, who was a friend of a friend. And again, directing her to, she was sitting on the couch and then sat on the ottoman. And I said, how about you just like start at the back room and just walk toward me? And this is, you can see on the right side of frame, that's her door, her front door. And just as she's walking toward me, just frame, you know, 1 second is as fast as my medium format will go, click, click, and, you know, getting that shot, anticipating getting that shot. And very, very different feel than some of these others. You know, feels almost like a fashion, you know, a very well produced fashion, but it was all done in minutes. More straightforward, looking through her, and she was very nervous about, you know, about being shot. You can kind of see that look on her face as well. This is Beth. Michael, our next door neighbor, who is got a jar full of marijuana, and you know, you can see the smoke in the air, and very eclectic. I love his dog there with the little cone over his head, kind of on frame left. And you know, one thing I love about choosing this one super wide lens was just the ability to open up a space, you know, to be at the front door or at the threshold of the door and still reveal so much of what's inside. Most of these I'm shooting wide open. If they're close to me, you know, you can see that fall off of depth. But you know, f4.5 is what I'm shooting this 28 millimeter at, 17.5, normal 35 equivalent. But yeah, I just love some of the feeling that we're getting through this. But that has a little bit of leftover from putting this in the presentation. But this is Bernice. She's a creative director at an ad agency here in Los Angeles, and had just given, since I had last seen her, which was had a portfolio review, and I reached out to her to say, hey, you know, we had been connected since I first met her at a portfolio review at the agency. Like, last time I saw you, you're about to give birth, and you know, just I would love to shoot a family. And so, because I try to focus either on families or singles, or trying to get a range of people. And you know, but I didn't realize, you know, because the stories come out. Like, she has a mom and dad who have a motel in Northern California, and they're trying to keep their motel going. I'm not sure if they can. They can't afford, you know, to hire help to clean it, but they can't close it. And, you know, she's so worried that they're at risk, you know, bringing people, you know, all people into this motel in the Bay Area, and having to clean it themselves. And so she was, you know, shipping up supplies to her. You know, nobody here could get alcohol wipes. Nobody here could get, I'm sure the same in New York. All the stores are stripped clean of anything to do with cleaning. And this is a fellow photographer, Benjo. Benjo Arwast, you know, does great editorial work, fashion, and he actually took over a studio that I had when I was in Santa Monica, and I left the country for a year and a half, and Benjo took it. But I just love the expressiveness of this. This is one where, because Benjo and I feel very comfortable, that I actually came in the front door and came into the space, and just instead to show the isolation, shot through this window open the window and pulled it away, just to still have that essence of feeling like there's something between us. You know, you're in your space. What's that?
Is he an Israeli photographer?
He is, yeah.
Yes, that's okay. I know the name. Yep.
Right, yeah, amazing. He shoots film almost exclusively, shoots, you know, 8 millimeter motion, and you know, great fashion work, great editorial fashion work.
Great.
Diana, musician. From shooting Flavio, who was the prescription delivery guy, and then also shooting the other musician. This is turning 180 from where my camera was and shooting the other musician standing up with her tattoos, looking through this door. Because like once I'm in the space, people are curious, like, hey, what's going on? What are you doing? You know, everyone's eager. It's like there's something happening in the world in my space. Someone's outside the threshold. You know, everyone is isolating indoors. It's kind of a treat to have a visitor. You know, even though I'm not visiting, it's more like, you know, coming into a space. You know, this is the second to last shot. And this is the end of, you know, a couple of friends where I shot two scenes. You know, first shot through the front door and, you know, not quite feeling it, and said, hey, you know, what about I go down the side of your building here and just hold that window open. Let me see if I can get you here. And I just love this. Love this, you know, the look in his eye, just that there's a sense of comfort here, you know, even though they are concerned. He is, you know, he is still working. This is his studio. He does, you know, designs the facades of buildings, like with Frank Gehry, the metal work on the side of the Gehry buildings. And this is his ex-wife, and she had to move back in with him for reasons of, you know, we're just, people have to make decisions of, you know, what's going on with life right now. And so kind of maybe, I'm guessing, a pretty awkward situation to have, you know, ask your ex, hey, can I move back in just for a short time? But, you know, you can see that it's not a struggling thing here. It's kind of that sense of contentment. And again, it's that feeling that I got through this project of feeling that I'm doing something which is, you know, meaningful to people. It's a document of the times, but it also, and when you look at it chronologically, you can see the arc of what we've gone through in these last, you know, since March 13th. So that's it. Here's, you can see my website. There's a dedicated Instagram page for this, and then my Instagram as well. So really appreciate it. Let me know if there's any questions. And it's you know, been a pleasure to share this work with you guys.
You know, Kevin, it's interesting, that last story about the couple. Like, they're both so decent that they could come back together. What made them split up, right? I mean, you know, as it relates to just, you know, part of the human condition and life in general, right?
I know. Yeah, that's a story for another part.
Yeah, that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Yeah, we can't thank you enough, Kevin, for sharing that that work. We're getting a ton of responses. Great work, great images. Everyone loves it. So we thank you very, very much, and you know, keep us informed. You know, actually, Kevin, this is really terrific because you have recordings of all of those people.
I do. Well, mostly all of them. You know, some I've actually deleted the recordings, I think, but because mostly what I'll do is transcribe, and I do have the audio. It's an iPhone audio. It's not, you know, I thought it would be wonderful because I also do motion and film work, you know, but that seemed like it was just too burdensome. I really want to be in and out of people's lives quickly. So that was like the fastest thing, but yeah, there is audio files of most of these.
This may be a nice way to get, to submit something for our video night, where you have some people who are, you know, are the essential workers, like the gentleman who's, you know, bringing your wife's medication, right? That guy is a hero.
Yeah.
Right. So if you had his commentary and a few other people like that who are working and still, you know, keeping us running, that could be terrific for our video night of projections. You know, with all these essential workers, that, you know, if you're interested in doing something like that, we'd love to have that, and we could talk about that more, you know, offline.
Yeah.
But you know, we thank you very, very much. Next up, we have Timothy. We're going to take a few-minute break for glasses of water, and we'll be right back. Break. And just as we wait for Timothy to get set up, just a couple of those dates again. We go live again next Tuesday on June 16th with a great cast of characters: Bruce Byers, Stefan Folka, and Paul Aresu. And the deadline for your video submissions for the Essential Worker evening is next Friday, June 19th. And June 24th will be that evening where we present the voices of the essential workers, the heroes who are keeping us running.
All right, I think we can get started with
Ready,
our
Tim?
last and final presenter.
All right, Timothy, it's all yours, buddy.
Great. Well, thank you for having me showing this work together with my esteemed colleagues. I'm sure that there might be a little bit of crossover between some of the locations that I photographed together with what Carol showed you. And maybe that's actually kind of interesting because it shows two ways of looking at the same story, the same location. So let's start with that. And I can tell you a little bit about myself as well. I've been a photojournalist for about 22, 23 years. And most of what I've been doing has been, well, social issues, conflicts, basically working as a news photographer. And, you know, very often the assignments would take me out of the city. And so I never really spent a lot of time in New York photographing stories, but and I knew immediately that this was going to be something very major, and since it would be inadvisable to travel, I may as well just focus on what's in my own backyard, what's in front of us. And as the photographs were being made and the series of pictures was developing, I realized that everything that we were faced is all about the virus. Everything is a virus. So whether it's walking out of your house or your apartment, you think about the virus. Getting on the subway, maybe inadvisable, but you think about the virus. Getting food, going to the supermarket, you think about the virus, and that's why the working title, Virus City, developed. And basically it was, the majority of photographs were shot not on assignment, just essentially a visual diary. So I would leave the apartment, go out, spend 2 to 4 hours, 6 hours following what was going on in the news. And let me just start with the first image. Even though the series I'm going to show you is primarily or mostly chronological, I think this photograph sort of sets the mood because it's also indicative of so much of how I found imagery in the first place. So this hospital in Brooklyn, it's in a mostly Jewish neighborhood, and I was driving around the periphery of the hospital looking for any sign of the FEMA refrigerated morgue trucks. And actually what this is, it's a loading dock way in the back of the hospital. And I drove past it and then immediately slammed on the brakes, jumped out with my camera. And what I noticed immediately was the reverence that this healthcare worker had with the patient. And although I didn't exchange words with this woman, presumably a nurse or maybe a doctor, you could just tell that this was a COVID patient. It was a special death. But also what's so strange is the way the environment in which it was photographed, which is not what one expects to see in New York City. And the other thing is, as we go through these pictures, you'll notice that actually there's not that many pictures of bodies, of victims. And that's actually a point of discussion, because I actually feel that we as a society needs to be reminded of the severity of COVID-19 and how dangerous it is. I'll walk you through some of these images, and this was shot on March 11th, maybe a little bit earlier, right before the citywide shutdown. This was the opening of the observation deck at the new Hudson Yards building on the 100th floor. But I included it because of the metaphorical significance of it, for me at least. It's this woman who is now, the world or the city is no longer at her fingertips. It's there for her to see, but she can't touch it because she's behind this glass. And this glass represents for me the stay-at-home order. As companies were asking their employees to stay at home, then that meant an emptying out of the subway. What this is rush hour. I went to the subway in the late afternoon around 5:30, and normally you would have that wall-to-wall people. Notice, however, nobody's wearing a mask, and you'll see that changes later on. And then the restaurants were ordered to close. So I went downtown to Soho, and I found Balthazar, and they had overturned the tables on the night of the shutdown. This, for me at least, which is one of my favorite restaurants to go as a customer, I found really sad. But the full weight and brunt of the sickness and the death hadn't hit New York yet. So this sadness of the visual of the restaurant was eventually replaced by the reality of the human tragedy. But panic was setting in, which we all kind of expected. At least I did. And in my neighborhood, I went to the local Costco and found this scene. I had actually gone with my camera to go shopping for myself at the supermarket on the second floor, but the Costco line was much more, let's say, visually interesting. So I finally went into my supermarket, and pretty much everything was gone. I mean, of course, it's kind of a cliche now, but the toilet paper was the first to go. And this is the toilet paper section. And the other thing is, if you're a New Yorker with a car, you know how frustrating it can be to drive, especially in Midtown at any hour of the day. And if there's any one, let's say, call it a small pleasure, if one can have such a pleasure in the midst of an unprecedented, once-in-a-lifetime tragedy that hits home, is the ability to drive the empty streets. There's something calming about it. And in fact, what I found is that at the end of a day of shooting, with all the stresses involved, I found solace to get out of the apartment and just drive. And this sentiment has been echoed by a lot of other people. Oh, by the way, I should go back. That's Times Square, and the woman who is walking in front of me. I only had one chance to make one picture because it happened so quickly, and I was very lucky to have framed it like this. And I continued looking for images that spoke about solitary isolation and you know, these quiet moments that New York was going through. And I think that because the Times Square picture came first, I was inspired to look for, you know, New York iconography, and Brooklyn Bridge being the most iconic bridge in New York, the US, if not the world. And that's also a rarity to find just two people. And there's one person in the background, of course. Then I went to Coney Island with my wife, and we just wanted to get out of our apartment. And I saw these American flags fluttering. Now, certainly it was, I think I shot this in April. Certainly, even on in a normal situation, April would be pretty empty. But it also, again, symbolically represented the, you know, the American situation, worldwide situation. But this is speaking about America. And again, iconography, Coney Island. But back to the reality of what the virus means to people beyond, you know, pretty pictures of isolation, is the actual fear of catching this virus. And I had read that Jackson Heights, Elmhurst, East Elmhurst, Corona, and actually, yes, there's a neighborhood called Corona. They're all adjacent to each other. They were bringing in the highest statistics of coronavirus infections in the entire city, primarily because of the residential density and how many people are living, how many families are living under one roof. That is one factor, plus a lot of the people who were getting infected, they could not isolate at home, they could not work from home. They were as said before, the essential workers, working in construction and delivery and so on. So I went to, this group here is people outside queuing for a COVID test at Elmhurst Hospital. And I gotta tell you, at that very point in the beginning of this virus emergency, I and pretty much nobody had any idea of how contagious this really was. So I started shooting initially with a very long lens, trying to keep my distance from any kind of, let's call it a hotspot. And fortunately, everyone was wearing a mask, but I just found that this was my first experience with coming face to face with the human contact or the human effect. Next is another shocking picture, at least if you're a New Yorker living in Manhattan, it's kind of shocking because I never would have expected to see a field hospital set up in Central Park. You know, in many ways, it's shocking, but it's also not shocking because in my career as a photographer, what I've seen in New York, although I missed Hurricane Sandy, I did experience and photograph 9/11. And with 9/11 in New York almost 20 years ago, the things, the scenes, the morgues that were being set up downtown played out very much like what was happening in New York. This also represented for me, you know, a chilling effect of seeing what I'd seen before in places like Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Kosovo, you know, tents and situations like that you never expect in New York. And this is one of the tents. I was able to get in just before they started admitting patients. And then
Tim?
Yeah.
Yeah, how did you get access into those places?
Well, being nice is helpful.
How'd you do that?
I don't know. It's not part of my personality, but I put on a good face, and I'm joking. No, I mean, I was able to find the person who was responsible for media relations, who was on site, and I was one of the early photographers, one of the first to get there, because the trucks had actually rolled past our window just the day before. And I looked it up and found out that they had established, or they were building their tent city right across from Mount Sinai on 100th Street. So I got there early, you know, I made contact early, and was really nice to her, and I showed her my press card and told her what I was doing, and yeah, she was like, okay, you have half an hour, just make it quick because we have patients coming in. So I ran around really quickly, but I actually found that the Central Park photo from far away was a little bit more telling of the story as opposed to being inside. But both, and there's a whole series of pictures that I'm not going to show it because of our limited time here. But I mean, one of the things about being a photojournalist, and everyone can attest, it's about you know, being an honest, authentic, charming person, because you're dealing with you know, split second yes or no. Does this person grant you access? It's really based on a lot of factors, but you know, don't be a bad person, and you get the candy, basically. The next series of pictures, including this one, comes from the 7 p.m. ritual of applauding the healthcare workers. And this one actually was from an event where the mayor de Blasio was going to hand out, strangely enough, goodie bags or gift bags to the healthcare workers. And I just thought that, you know, sometimes you want to jump on a press junket kind of thing, like a PR event. And I think I might have made one picture of the mayor, but I used his presence and the acceptance of the media as sort of like an entree into the world of medicine. Oh, and the other thing is, I had put in a few requests to hospitals to get access, but I was turned down because I didn't have a big name publication behind me. So I was photographing the periphery, including some of these things. And this, of course, Carol will recognize this window. This is the exterior of Lenox Hill Hospital on Lexington and 77th Street. And I just like the framing. You know, I had seen a lot of really great photography of these events. The emotion that comes from the faces of the healthcare workers in response to the outpouring of appreciation and cheering. And I wanted to, you know, just try to make a picture that also showed some sort of graphic design element that there, and I used these 2 mounted police officers as bookends. I don't know, it's just sometimes something I'm looking for. But I turned my camera also to the crowd, and this woman, it's the exact same location, it's Lenox Hill, and I just found her holding the flag to her face kind of interesting.
Yeah, Tim, can you speak to, you know, all your experience around the world covering conflict and protest and all of that, the similarities and the differences of shooting, you know, in your home country?
Yeah, well, it's a couple of things I've noticed is that if you call a pandemic, if you consider a pandemic, let's say, a story, obviously it's a personal tragedy and a personal hardship for everyone, including me, of course, because I'm in it. But if you're the photographer, you look at it like a story, and every story has an arc, a narrative arc, that there is going to be, you know, a buildup, a crescendo, an apex, and then the aftermath. You saw that with the Black Lives Matters protests, with you know, the raw emotion and anger in the first day or two, and then it ebbed a little bit. Well, this is the same. So the question is, what you're asking about my experience in covering these things, this is what I expected as well, that with my experience shooting other stories in other countries, you just basically follow every single event that takes place, but then you anticipate what's going to happen next by just experience. So eventually, as people are cured, or not cured, I should say, develop immunity, and then eventually as the curve is flattened, and then the number of cases and deaths decline, so will the stress levels, and so will the crowds, and so will eventually the end of the 7 p.m. cheering. So basically, you have to jump on these things as they happen, and you have to anticipate it in advance in a way. So I'm not sure if I'm really answering the question, but the parallels are nearly, not even parallel, they're identical, whether it's a refugee crisis or an earthquake. There's always a narrative arc, and that's what we're seeing in New York. And the other thing is, luckily, I mean, things have changed quite a lot. We can follow the news on our phone, and if I discovered that another photographer photographed a virus testing location, I can find out where it is and go there the same day, because a lot of the photographs being posted by wire photographers are available for viewing the same day. So I was able to locate this place in Queens based on another photographer's doing the same thing. So there's that kind of back and forth. And also it's very interesting that I've also been asked by photographers, hey, where'd you shoot that? And I am not stingy with information, because I know I'm going to have to ask them one day, hey, where'd you shoot that? So it goes both ways. Then you'll notice, you probably have seen it all over the city, are the morgue trucks, the refrigerated trucks that FEMA brought in for pretty much every hospital that needed one. And this one was set up outside Bellevue, just east of First Avenue near the FDR Drive.
So
I believe that these trucks have been removed recently, or they're in the process of being removed. I think the last truck overall will be removed this weekend, which means that we're well past the emergency.
yeah, so I mean, it's not lost on you that those trucks were, covering Katrina. Those trucks, all these other disasters. I mean, even with everything you've seen in your career, does this do something to you when you see this in the streets of Manhattan?
Emotionally, okay, taking the photographer out of the equation and just me as a bystander with no camera, it's really shocking. I mean, it's not just visually shocking, it's actually it's unexpected that you think that New York City is so put together, that we could go through and survive 9/11 and Superstorm Sandy, and then we bounce back. But these trucks representing potentially, I don't know, I can't even guess how many bodies they can hold, 30, 40, 50, and that each truck represents 50 people, and that we're looking at potentially 400 or 500 people with this soldier. It rattled my nerves to a point where there were days that I couldn't go out and shoot because it was just overwhelming. But that is maybe that's a good thing that I'm not a robot.
Right.
But
and what street is this? Where is this?
That's the cross street is, well, it's at Bellevue, which I believe is, what is that, 28th Street and East First Avenue. So there's a service road between the FDR Drive and the back of Bellevue Hospital.
All right.
Yeah.
NYU.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like I was saying at the very beginning, I felt that it was really important to make pictures of the victims, covered, of course, as they were being brought to these refrigerated trucks. I feel like other culture to openness of, showing the sick and showing the dead. And I think it's actually in our best interest to have that. Now, you realize that with most other people have a different approach and a different opinion. They think it's disrespectful to photograph this, and I've been told many times, "Hey, what are you doing? Get away, leave! How dare you?" and so on. I mean, at that kind of exchange, that is not the time to like lecture anybody on the intricacies of the First Amendment and how important it is for the public to see this. But this is the challenge that I have faced as a photojournalist. And one thing is, even though it's kind of difficult to exchange words, sometimes you just have to, walk away. You made your picture, then don't linger. Just so you don't anger people. I mean, everyone has the right to their own feeling about respect, and so there's that.
I have to say, it's interesting hearing you use the term refrigerator trucks. Just that in and of itself, and then thinking that there are bodies in there, not ice cream, is that really cuts right through. It's amazing. Really amazing.
I mean, the simple thing is that the in-hospital morgues can only hold an average of 8 to 10 bodies, and we're talking about 30 bodies a day, 30 people, I should say, dying per day in some of these hospitals. So as these refrigerated trucks were being filled, the funeral homes were being called, and they would come by and then collect the dead. But yeah, it's chilling, and it's really, I start wondering, like, what could have been done better so that we wouldn't have 100,000 plus dead in America. That's maybe another discussion. What I wanted to do is also take a closer look at what happens after the funeral homes collect the bodies from these trucks. So I went to a funeral home in Queens near Elmhurst Hospital and walked in the first day without my camera. I left my camera in the car, and I asked the owner, well, I petitioned him. I basically told him the importance of showing bodies has an educational effect, so people remember, wear their mask, wash your hands, keep at least 6 feet apart. Don't mingle in supermarkets longer than you have to, because the danger is real, the fear is real, and this is an example. And he completely agreed. So the next morning I came in, he's like, Tim, we're expecting at least 40 bodies that we have to send out for cremation. You're welcome to hang out. And I spent 6 hours, ended up being like 10 hours in the funeral home. But what I found about this picture, again, chilling, in the end, it's kind of clinical the way you go out. You go out in a cardboard box, and there's a man who's the mortician, by the way, creating a database, essentially cataloging the intake and outtake. So even when you're in your final stage, there's somebody who's documenting you. This man. I find this to be an extremely disturbing photograph. I always think about funeral homes as a place where family members can gather and mourn together and comfort, console. And none of that existed here. This is a viewing room. It was just converted into a warehouse. find that to be disturbing. And then the last picture that I made from this funeral home is this one, where they were loading the cardboard caskets, the bodies in the cardboard caskets, into a U-Haul van, which was going to be driven to Vermont to a crematorium. The reason is that all the New York City crematoriums were full, and they couldn't take another body for 2 more months. 2 more months.
And Tim, is there
Yeah.
anything ceremonial about this process? You know, or is it as if they were putting in milk crates?
Unfortunately, there's nothing ceremonial. I can attest to the respect that the funeral home workers have toward the way they walk around the victims is one of utmost respect. They're quiet. They handle the bodies carefully. You know, funeral home directors, I never really spoke to any until this event. They really care about the dead that passed through their home. And it actually pains them a little bit that the only way that they can provide comfort is by, once the cremation occurs, then the ashes are returned in an urn to the home, and then they hand the urn directly to the family members. But there is no, it's just put the bodies into a truck. There's no ceremony. I find that it's a little bit heartbreaking.
Yeah.
When you think about it. Yeah. And also, what's even more heartbreaking is the way these people were kept, as they were in the hospital dying. They were kept from their families. Their families were not allowed to visit them in person.
Right.
Yeah. So the final picture of that particular series is at, even though it's not where these bodies were taken, this is the crematorium at Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. And there are 5 chambers. They don't like to call them ovens, but that's what they are. 3 of them broke because they were handling 3 times the number of bodies than they should. And the chambers just overheated and the interior tiles cracked, and they had to stop using them. So they were only able to, at this time when I photographed it, using 2 chambers. And that, so the other odd, let's call it an odd thing, is that the more I photographed this process, the more I learned about the process, the more I read about it, and the more conversations I had with people who were handling the COVID dead. And it's, yeah, but the whole thing is just really chilling and disturbing, but it takes roughly, if a body is in a wooden casket as opposed to a cardboard casket, it could take up to 6 hours to burn. If a body is in a cardboard casket, it'll take about 4 hours. And I don't know, I'm not sure if I appreciated this little tidbit of knowledge when I was speaking to the director of this crematory, but there you have it. That's what I learned. And you know, so I'm not gonna get into it. Rather than I'm gonna keep moving my pictures forward because I'm getting a little upset thinking about it. Yeah. We entered in New York also a phase of weirdness, and near my home there was a argument. There were 3 things that were happening. One guy said that this guy was stealing, another guy said he was spitting, but you know what, there was so much anger going on and I had no idea what happened. But I figured that, you know, everything that happens in New York at this time is virus related, and the fact that one cop is wearing a mask and the other one isn't, the fact that there's a man with a mask holding out his hand and a bloodied face, it spoke to the unsettling nature of New York. And this is the phase of the unsettling part that I'd like to show. I drove out to JFK to Terminal 1. I wanted to see what Terminal 1 looked like because I knew that there were only 5% of flights departing. So this was the only passenger, at least for 20 minutes while I was there, in a full hazmat suit and glasses.
Wow.
I've never seen
Easy-
anything like this. Have you?
Yeah, Tim, easy access into the airport terminals like that?
Not really. I mean, yeah, you can get in, but you have to be careful because it's run by the Port Authority, and the Port Authority, if you've ever tried to photograph anything that they manage, the New Jersey Transit or Path, I should say, they don't provide access. So you sort of have to covertly make pictures. And when I entered from the other side, which was where the TSA people check your passport as you enter, they shoot me away. So I went to the front, and there was a food court above, and I was able to make a picture before they chased me away again. And yeah, I only made that one picture before I left. I didn't want the Port Authority police to start questioning me. And I actually saw a Port Authority police car pull up, and I assumed it was for me. So I put my camera in my bag and I hurried out. The other thing is that there's not a lot of photography, at least I didn't see, except for the pictures of the elderly in, behind glass in windows in retirement homes. So I photographed a little bit some of the older people living in the housing projects in Brooklyn. And I'm not going to include all of them, but this woman, her name is Marjorie, and she's 75. And, I told her to put her mask over her nose. And she did after this picture, of course, but she didn't want to leave the building because, she felt that she was in the high-risk category and didn't want to go shopping. And she was waiting for her granddaughter to return from the grocery store. And then the other thing on the subject of food, and that kind of put the pictures all together, is another shocking thing is to see all of these able-bodied people waiting on a food pantry line. And this one in Queens, at a church that they distribute food for over 1,200 people, 1,500 people every Saturday, saw the folks lined up at 6 in the morning, as early as 6, waiting before the noon. They started distributing food at 11, so they waited 5 hours before they could collect their food. Pretty shocking for New York City. But of course, people lost the high unemployment of New York. I think the last was, I was reading 30-something%. That's crazy. Of unemployed. And then another food line at the Bowery Mission had these 2 people in the front with baseball caps, which I also found a little bit unnerving because these are people who look like you and me in a way. And I think it's really important as a photojournalist not to always photograph the other. I think it's important to also try to make a picture that one's, let's call it readership or demographic, or that it's everyone. This virus is touching everyone, and it's not just the other, the poor. If that makes any sense. I found this scene to be really very touching, and the police officer was very compassionate. But he had been compassionate even without me being around. I don't think he really noticed me. What's happening here is they were trying to begin the process of sanitizing the subway because the lockdown wouldn't be forever. And you know, I understand if you're without a home, if you have no roof over your head, and you have a choice: do you want to live in a shelter where the virus is rampant, or do you want to live on the street or in the subway? And this man chose to live on the subway, but they were trying to escort people away from the subway so they could begin cleaning. So this officer is offering him the choice of go to a hospital or a shelter, and he chose neither, and he eventually left the subway altogether and walked up onto the street. And at this point, and I can overhear the conversation, he's deliberating, literally deciding what to do. And this is actually in the Bronx. Again, what I was drawn to in terms of location, events, and also making imagery were scenes that I found personally shocking. I mean, this is personally shocking. I'm a New Yorker. I have never seen, nor did I ever expect to see, people in hazmat suits. And so they're spraying with a cleaning solution. We're almost at the end, and I just have, I think, 2 pictures left, maybe 3. But and this is Jane's Carousel in Dumbo. So for me, at least, this is sort of representing the end of that narrative arc that I was talking about. That we're not just like the first picture or the second picture of the woman looking out at New York and the skyline. This is, it's closed to the public, but it's also, I read into these pictures. I don't know if everyone feels the same way, but for me at least, this is like almost open. This is like, there's still hope. Keep waiting, but change will come. Eventually things like restaurants will open, businesses will open, people might go back to work and so on. And this Jane's Carousel represents a little bit of that. I think it is the last picture. Yes, so the last picture, I felt like I couldn't ignore the most important thing that's happened in the last 2 weeks is that, the series of protests, George Floyd, Black Lives Matters. I think that I'm going to end on this picture because for a lot of reasons, but this is like the next phase. I mean, one could easily do an entire presentation with you, Frank, on Black Lives Matter protests, police brutality. This fits in many ways with the COVID coverage because all of that social distancing that we had been adhering to was now out the window, and you had massive groups of tens of thousands of people 6 inches apart. So goodbye social distancing and forget about coronavirus. But this is, again, I didn't want to leave on a tragic note, but for me at least, whenever there's a ray of sunlight, that for me is a metaphor for a brighter future. And hopefully, whether it's the discovery of a virus vaccine or a change in funding and approach to policing, this is how I'd like to end this presentation.
No, that it really is powerful, and you know what? I think for the rest of us, you do us a service to show us reality, the things that we don't see, or the things we can only imagine, and the way you put the words to your imagery gets all of us right where you were standing, and for better or worse, you get that sick feeling in your stomach that is totally necessary during these times. So for that, you do. I mean, I can't really thank you enough to bringing it really, really close to home, and or not close to home. You brought us home, because this is our world that we live in these days, and to give us context to that is what we all need, and that's why we admire what photojournalists do. They peel back the onion, they get behind the curtain, and they show us, this is the real world. So for that, I can't thank you enough, Tim. It's just powerful. And
Thank you very much, Frank, for having me.
Yeah, and our door is open, for you all the time. And unfortunately, moving forward after probably another week or so from now, we'll be getting into Black Lives Matter and that whole issue, because that's really, really important. So again, thank you so much. And everyone in the chat room is just in awe of your imagery and your words. So your storytelling is just been great. So I can't thank you enough. And the same goes for Kevin and Carol. You've made this an incredibly compelling evening, and we all are humbled by what you did for us tonight. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you all.
Just to run through a couple of the bits of information. We're back on Tuesday on the 16th. So hopefully you'll be getting notices, of course, with a great lineup. The deadline is the 19th for submissions for the essential workers videos. So we're looking forward to getting that. If anyone has other questions, you can put them in the chat room now, or you can contact me at frank@thephotocollector.com. We're here to answer any of your questions, but really, what a terrific evening. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for everyone that
really
came out. Appreciate it. If there's any other comments, feel free to reach out to Frank and I. We're happy to accommodate those. Again, to all the speakers, we didn't really get a chance to mention a lot of the comments. I just wanted to mention that now. There were so many really powerful presentations and comments that people were just saying that they loved it. Really painful, really moving. It doesn't always have to be the bright,
really
shiny side of things, but very authentic and very honest. And there were a lot of good comments. I just wanted to mention that because we didn't get a chance to interject too much. If anyone has any other comments for Frank and I, please just reach out anytime. We're always happy to adjust this and accommodate those. Having said that, again, the videos, feel free to ask us any questions about it. Try and keep them horizontal. Don't think that you have to be there in person. Your safety is very important to us. You can do this virtually. You can have them record themselves. If you have any questions, just reach out to either one of us and we'll give you direction as needed. And again, we'll see you guys very soon. Thank you. Thank you very much for all the speakers, and thank you everyone for coming out.
Right. We'll see you on Tuesday. Good night, everybody.